Call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. When you're ready, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ackerson?
Here.
Ms. Billman?
Here.
Mr. Fell? Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins? Here. Ms. Wadrago?
Here.
Mr. Turner? Mr. Weiskopf?
Here.
And Ms. Yu.
We do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda? No changes. Approval of the minutes of the Plan Commission meeting of October 18th, 2018.
I'd like to move the minutes be approved as distributed.
Motion by Mr. Ackerson. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Billman. We'll take this on a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The minutes are approved. Communications. We do have a communication, two actually, one of which is in the packet, and it is a note from Thomas Hayes. In three? I'm only seeing two.
Terry, I think you distributed a double-sided
Oh,
email
double-sided.
that
Okay,
came since
super.
the memo.
Thank you. Three communications. One from Thomas Hayes opposing the proposed rezone that we will consider in Plan Case 2357 M18. Another from Evelyn Shapiro, also opposed to the rezoning in 2357 M18. And another from Bev Fagan, again opposed to the proposed rezone in 2357 M18. Those will be entered into the record. Ms. Billman?
I only see two. Where's the
One
other
of them's at the very end of the memo.
Okay.
Yeah. Exhibit H in the memo, which I probably didn't have to call out, but just in case. So now, we have no continued public hearings. We have no new business, old business, I mean. We do have new public hearings. So we're going to open Plan Case number 2357, M18, a request by Jonah Weiskopf on behalf of AGRJ Investments LLC to rezone 3 parcels totaling approximately .55 acres at 307 South Busey Avenue, 401 South Busey Avenue, and 403 South Busey Avenue, also known as 802 West Illinois Street, from R4 medium-density multifamily to R5 medium-high-density multifamily residential. And I believe we'll have Mr. Weiskopf. He's recusing himself for conflict of interest.
And while Lily is getting the presentation ready, I'll just remind you, I think she was introduced at your last meeting, but this is Lily Wilcock, our newest planner.
Yay.
Hey, everybody. This is my first case, too, so just remember that. Be friendly.
Well, please proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we are, as you mentioned, we are talking about rezoning from R4 medium density to R5 medium high. The property owners of the 3 parcels with addresses that you already just mentioned, they cite continued growth of the university student body, and the rezoning would match the existing zoning for the block, and additionally, the R6 property to the south. It is the Plan Commission's responsibility to review the proposed zoning map amendment to determine whether the proposed zoning map amendment satisfies the LaSalle-Sinclair criteria, and to recommend to the City Council whether or not to approve the zoning map amendment. Staff recommends the proposed zoning map amendment be approved. I'm going to go into a little bit of background. Jonah Weiskopf requested, on behalf of AgriJ, that's how it's pronounced? AGRJ Investments, LLC, to rezone the properties. In 2005, comprehensive plan, notes the purpose of the Lincoln Busey corridor, which is just south of the properties. Let me pull that up. Here's where the properties are. It mentions that the Lincoln-Busey corridor to preserve the character of the neighborhood and reduce further encroachment of higher density buildings in this unique residential area. Even as the comprehensive plan labels the parcels as multifamily, the comp plan cites the UIUC student body as 38,904. According to the university's Division of Management Information, 2016, the latest numbers that they have for on-campus enrollment is 44,880. The desire to preserve the unique character of the neighborhood was discussed and considered in the 2000 comprehensive plan. In it, these properties on the block are campus, mixed use, and multifamily for further future uses. Many of the potential uses are the same in between the current R4 and the proposed R5. The main differences between the two zoning districts are floor area ratio and open space ratio, which I'll discuss a little bit further when we talk about the LaSalle criteria for rezoning, but those are the major differences. The discussion for this. The properties actually were R5, and in February 1991, they were downzoned to R4 as a part of the downtown to campus plan. They were a part of a rezoning that was 203 parcels. The ordinance approved the downzoning, citing several reasons to support the rezoning, including the area experienced severe parking shortages and are located in an area where the sanitary and storm sewers may have insufficient capacity to accommodate the increased demands resulting from new high-density multiple-family residential development. Since the rezoning was approved by that ordinance, conditions have changed to make those justifications no longer applicable. And I'll attempt to address each of these concerns as the area infrastructure and uses have changed since 1991. First, the parking shortages. The 300 and 400 blocks of South Busey Avenue and the 700 and 800 blocks of West Illinois. So we're talking about this area here, and we're talking about this and this area here. They have approximately 22 available on-street parking spaces. And in the past year, only 10 on-street parking permits were pulled from the finance department. Secondly, since the downzoning was approved, and I will say, not that this was done last winter, but in 2017, staff did do a survey of multifamily residents owners and asked them, hey, is a lot of this parking being used for their buildings? And they said, actually people are bringing less cars and using less of the parking. As a general statement, that was kind of mentioned in there, but I don't want to confuse that between the on-street parking situation. Secondly, since downzoning was approved, the city has instituted requirements to manage stormwater. Any additional impervious area introduced as a part of a redevelopment of the site would trigger the need for a stormwater management plan and stormwater detention to account for the increased runoff. The post-development flow from the site would be restricted based on the pre-development conditions. This would prevent any significant impact on storm sewers due to the redevelopment. The sanitary sewer system has also been improved by the 1990 Kohler Avenue Area Sewer Improvements Project, which was completed after the rezoning was approved. The project provided a relief sewer along Kohler Avenue and a larger sanitary sewer downstream from the subject site. The city engineer for development has indicated that the increased density from R4 to R5 for this site would generate a near negligible increase of sanitary sewer flows. And I'm going to really fast. There has been a little bit of confusion about the properties that are being addressed, so I just want to pull up some pictures that I took after a really nice, lovely snow. And so here is 403 South Busey. In the front there is 802 West Illinois. This is 401 South Busey, and this is 307 South Busey. Here's the land use. While I'm talking about this, I think it's important for us to see how the area and the surrounding area properties are being currently used. So the first LaSalle criteria is the number one, the existing land uses and zoning of the nearby property. The proposed rezoning to R5, medium high density multiple family residential, is compatible with the zoning and land uses of the immediate area. The 3 parcels on the block that are zoned, the 3 parcels on this block are on a block that's almost exclusively zoned R5 and contains several other apartment buildings, a single-family rental, a church, and a gas station. To the south, there is a higher density apartment building zoned R6. To the east, there are 2 single-family rental residences and a small apartment building zoned R2. Further northeast, there is a mix of R3 and R4 zoning adjacent to the MOR, mixed office residential zoning district. So, number 2 of the LaSalle criteria, the extent to which property values are diminished by the restrictions of the ordinance. The proposed rezoning should not reduce the property values of the neighboring properties. The single-family homes and apartment building across the street from the properties are already facing apartment buildings on the parcels in question. The primary differences between the R4 and R5 zoning districts are an increase in the number of allowed uses and a reduction of several development regulations. For instance, required yards, floor area ratio, and open space ratio. Many of the allowed uses that are allowed in R5 but not in R4 require special use and conditional use permit, which would require another level of review for approval. Most residential land uses are the same between the 2 zoning districts. Increasing the flexibility of these properties for future use should not reduce the property values of the surrounding properties. So as that is satisfied, I will move on to criteria number 3, the extent to which the ordinance promotes the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the public. The proposed rezoning will not affect the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public in any significant way. There is little difference between the current R4 and the proposed R5 zoning districts in this regard. As an example, the current R4 zoning could allow up to 0.7 FAR, which is the floor area ratio, if there is a 2,000 square feet lot area per unit, while R5 zoning allows up to 0.9 FAR. Combined, these lots are approximately 22,000 square feet. Under R4 zoning, nearly 16,000 square feet of buildings could be constructed. Under the proposed R5, about 20,000 square feet could be constructed, an increase of about 4,400 square feet. The existing buildings would be more in compliance with zoning regulations under the proposed R5 zoning than they currently are. So with that criteria satisfied, we're going to move to number 4. The relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed on the individual property owner. The public would gain little if the existing zoning is maintained, as the properties would likely continue to be used in their current form. If the properties are rezoned, the small increase in density allowed under the R5 zoning could reduce some of the pressure to develop more apartments east of Busey Avenue, which could be beneficial to the public and adjacent neighborhood. For the property owner, the rezoning would allow the properties to be redeveloped as a slightly higher density, which would be a benefit for them. It is uncertain whether the existing zoning could be considered a hardship. The property owner will not see a significant increase in permitted uses. It's kind of hard. So with that, we're going to move to number 5. The 5th criteria is the suitability of the subject property for the zone purposes. The properties are well suited for medium-high density residential housing, which would be allowed under the proposed R5 zoning, given the existing R5 zoning to the west and north. The proposed R5 district is logical. It also reflects multifamily residential future land use destination as shown in the 2005 comprehensive plan. Sanitary sewer improvements in the area and current stormwater management requirements eliminate the previous concerns over capacity and flooding, respectively. As the property is close to the University of Illinois campus, with 45,000 students, roughly. The applicant has stated the medium-high density, as opposed to medium density, housing is in demand in the area. Number 6, that length of time the property has been vacated as zone considered in the context of land development in the area in the vicinity of the subject property. The property is not currently vacant, so we're not going to consider that. Number 7, the community's need for more of the proposed use. The property owner cites the growing student population as a need for higher density housing close to campus. The 2005 comprehensive plan takes into consideration the need and benefit of student housing in the multifamily residential designation. Number 8, the care with which the community has planned its land use development. When the city adopted the comprehensive plan in 2005, the previous plan for the area, the downtown to campus plan, was superseded. The comprehensive plan created areas with different levels of residential intensities, regional, community, and central. The area where these properties are located, due to the proximity of the University of Illinois campus, was envisioned as part of the higher density multifamily residential future land use designation. And really fast, let's just pull that up. There you go. You can see multifamily, you can see campus mixed use, and that's the block, and then you can see residential and medium density, and this is the R6 property that was cited in the application. A transitional area between single-family homes to the east and university property to the west. Proposed rezoning to R5 medium-high density multifamily residential zoning district would be consistent with this designation. So, I've got. I'm going to jump to the summary of staff findings. 1, Jonah Weiskopf, part owner on behalf of AGR J Investments LLC, has petitioned to rezone 3 parcels, 307, 401, and 403 South Busey Avenue. 2, the properties would be rezoned from R4 medium density multiple family residential to R5 medium high density multiple family residential zoning district to meet the demands of the continued growth of the university's student body. 3, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan. 4, the proposed rezoning generally meets the rezoning criteria. 5, staff has received 1 piece of correspondence, and this is from the memo, so it's 1, but now it's 3. Pieces of correspondence in opposition to the request, in addition to the 1 in your packet. I'm sorry, so there's 2, and there's 1 in your packet. Those have been placed on the table. Options. So, as a plan commission, you have options. The following options for this case is 1, forward the case to City Council with the recommendation to approve the request as presented, or 2, forward the case to City Council with a recommendation to deny the request. Staff recommendation, based on the evidence presented in the discussion above, and without the benefit of considering additional evidence that may be presented at a public hearing, staff recommends the Plan Commission forward the case number 2357 M18 to City Council with a recommendation to approve the proposed rezoning.
Thank you, Ms. Wilcox.
Yeah.
Are there any questions
Zoning.
for city staff? Mr. Hopkins?
The apartment on the northeast corner of Busey in Illinois is non-conforming?
I'm sorry, the northeast quarter of Busey, Illinois. Yeah, I haven't looked at that building to see if it's conforming or not, but if it's R2 and it says apartment high, that's a red flag for me to go look at it, for sure.
Well, okay. I mean, it matters a little bit. Because I'm not looking it up, the parking requirements for R4 and R5 are the same or different?
They're the same. So we do parking, with the exception of the B4, the downtown district, parking is done solely by use, not by zone.
Okay. And the height limit remains the same,
It does.
so we're
yes.
talking about a 3-story building in either case.
35 feet, yeah, is the limit. Unlike the building to the south, which is taller.
Any further questions? No further questions? All right, thank you. Good job. You passed your first test. All right, now, I'll just remind everyone of the procedures for public hearing. Normally, the petitioner would have a chance to address this and outline the proposal. In that case, that petitioner has had to recuse himself, so that won't be possible tonight. Normally, we would then allow anyone in favor of the proposal to address the commission. And then following that, anyone opposed to the proposal could address the commission. And then normally the petitioner would get a chance to close it up. But again, that won't, I don't think, happen tonight. So does anyone want to speak in favor of this proposal? Does anyone wish to speak in opposition to this proposal? Okay. Well, that's very brief public input. Thank you for your attendance. We will now close the public input portion of the hearing and go into discussion, followed by possible motions and perhaps a vote. So any discussion? Any thoughts? Mr. Ackerson?
Yes, thank you. In looking at the brief memos, they seem to just be, we don't want more density here, if I understand them correctly. But one of the notice I says these older rental houses in that area are becoming quite run down when they are not maintained. And I wish I could ask somebody proposing this. I know intended use does not impact necessarily our, the whole vote on the rezoning because it's not the building. But I'm assuming that if it is rezoned, one is it makes it more consistent with the rest of the block, but that actually there might be some kind of development that replaces older rental housing that has become run down in that area. So that, to me, is a little counterintuitive to the argument that they're trying to make. So to me, actually, if I'm making a big assumption here, which is somebody wants to do some kind of development here that would upgrade or replace older rundown housing.
Anything further, discussion-wise? No? Ms. Billman?
Well, I just am trying to figure out what is the real, I don't see a lot of advantage, or, I mean, I'm confused as to the advantages and disadvantages. Can we discuss more of that?
Sure, and city staff might be able to weigh in. My understanding, and Mr. Hopkins certainly would know, is that they make a larger building.
Yeah,
It can't go any higher
yeah,
because of the 35-foot requirement, but it can have a bigger footprint.
yeah.
Is that fair? So more apartments, if that's what it would happen. Any further discussion?
No, I'll just throw my 2 cents again, which is, I just happened to be in that neighborhood anyway today on some other business because I was at the university, and I don't think a slightly larger building on that block, which would be consistent with the zoning that they're asking for, seems to present a real problem to me in the transition, because I don't think the change from R4 to R5 is that significant. That's just my 2 cents.
Ms. Billman?
I just drove by there also and was thinking the same thing. It's basically denser.
That's right.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Failing that, is anybody prepared to
Somebody make a
move?
motion. Okay. I move we send plan case 2357 M18 to the city council with a recommendation for approval.
Motion by Mr. Hopkins, second by Mr. Ackerson. Any further discussion? If not, can we please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Billman?
Yes?
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Ms. Wadrago?
Yes.
Mr. Ackerson.
Yes.
That motion is approved. So now, I believe Mr. Weiskopf can rejoin us?
He can rejoin you, and to answer your next question, it would be scheduled for City Council on December 17th.
She's good. Okay. Now for Plan Case 2358 T18, an application by the zoning administrator to amend the zoning ordinance with changes to Article 8, Parking and Access, to modify the requirements for handicap parking to reflect changes in state law for handicapped parking spaces. Now, sure, before we start on this, there was a communication, I think, a question more than a communication.
Yes, I can mention that maybe once we
When-
get into...
when you- oh,
yeah.
great, yeah.
While Will's pulling up any presentation that he might have, I will introduce him. This is our planning intern, Will Andreessen. This is also his first
This
case.
is newbie night. This is,
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that. But he worked on this, and we wanted to give him the opportunity to present in front of
Great.
you.
Good evening, Plan Commission.
welcome.
So, as a brief background on this case, this request was brought up due to recently, in October, the Illinois Commerce Commission accepted a revised version of the Illinois Accessibility Code. This was due to the code itself had not been updated since 1987, and the code now, statewide, adheres to the federal guidelines. Excuse me. Now, the text change itself for this, City Ordinance Article 8, Parking and Access, would then therefore refer to these new state standards. The state standards we are now looking to change deal with parking stalls and access aisles. As it currently stands, parking stalls themselves, accessible parking stalls, must have a their own access aisle corresponding to that. The proposed change, referring to the state standards, would allow these two access aisles to then share, or sorry, a stall would share an access aisle, as you can see here. And to also continue with that, it provides a flexibility in the allowable widths of these access aisles and parking spaces. As you can see from this figure 502.2 right here, this is the requirement now, and that parking stalls must be a minimum of 8 feet, along with the access aisle being a minimum of 8 feet. But it would also allow the flexibility to have two parking stalls be a minimum of 11 feet with a shared access aisle width of 5 feet. Excuse me. To continue with the discussion, this change overall will make it much easier for staff to administer the zoning ordinance and make it easier for developers and architects to comply with the ordinance. It would also simplify the ordinance by referring directly to the Illinois Accessibility Code so that any future changes will automatically be reflected in the zoning ordinance. I'll try to make it brief here. In terms of options, as the Plan Commission, you can recommend it to the City Council to approve it as presented. You can approve as modified with specific changes, or you may recommend to deny. Based on the evidence presented in the discussion above, and without the benefit of considering additional evidence that may be presented at the public hearing, staff recommends that the Plan Commission forward Plan Case number 2358T18 to the Urbana City Council with the recommendation to approve the proposed text amendment to the zoning ordinance.
And just to add, I think there was one table that we didn't print out of the 45 pages of state code that we should have, and that was the table for minimum number of parking spaces. So we are suggesting that we strike our table and then instead just refer to the state code, which has its own table. Now, the numbers do differ slightly. They differ in one category, and that's the smallest category. So currently on our books, our requirement is one handicapped or one accessible parking space for every 20 standard spaces. The state code is now at one accessible space for 25 standard parking spaces. And I did have I had an email conversation with representatives from the Pace Center today and yesterday about that, and their latest, I explained how few parking lots we get within that 21 spaces to 25 spaces, and they were satisfied with this as presented, just to refer back to the state code. And as a side note, the City of Champaign also just refers to state and federal codes. They don't have their own separate requirements, so this would also bring us in line with our neighbors to the west.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Any questions for city staff? Mr. Hopkins?
So, yes, the table was missing. So 1 per 25 means one for any parking lot smaller than 25.
That's correct.
Okay,
So if they have 2 parking spaces, one of them will be accessible.
correct, okay. And it then goes to 2 for 26.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I think I've already learned something here, that what you presented to us are excerpts. And the excerpts are actually not sufficient to, unless they are very closely cut, they don't actually say what needs to be said. And so I'm trying to figure out whether it does. The statement about 8 or 11 as the minimum does not say that 8 is only the minimum if there is an 8-foot aisle. You can figure that out from the diagrams, but the statement in the text does not actually refer to the correct diagram and say that that's the reason. It simply says they can be 8 or 11. Now, the text may be somewhere else, but we're not seeing it. So it seems to me that's pretty important. I have another question about enforcement, and this comes from being a chauffeur for somebody who actually uses these spaces. In the case of the 8-foot aisle, 8-foot space and the 8-foot aisle, it has to be legal to park in the 3 feet, that is, the extra 3 feet in the 8-foot aisle as opposed to the 5-foot aisle, in order for someone to exit on the right-hand door in an 8-foot space. Now, enforcement people in these cities, I will put it that way, because it's not Urbana that my primary experience is with, do not seem to be entirely clear on this fact of whether the crosshatch space is telling you you cannot park there, or whether it's telling you that that is reserved so that a handicap tagged car can actually overlap it. So I guess, again, I don't know whether this is explained anywhere in this, but because of the way we as Urbana are adapting an ordinance that I think are adopting by reference a document that I think is incomplete and perhaps problematic, I'm reluctant to live with it unless somebody can show me that these things are explicitly dealt with.
Well, if I can try to understand a little bit more. So our ordinance today doesn't allow someone to do the 11-foot parking space with the 5-foot aisle. It says you must do an 8-foot and an 8-foot space and 8-foot aisle. So what that means then is that you do have that instance where you have a car parking on the hatch, and that could confuse people.
But it's legal.
Correct.
Okay.
Whereas with the state flexibility allowing 11-foot parking space and an aisle, then that means that there's more room for that vehicle to park within that 11 feet.
Right.
So it kind of makes more sense to most people, I think. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but what I'm concerned about is that the markings then mean 2 different things in 2 different circumstances. That is, in the one case, I'm not allowed to overlap because I'm supposed to stay within the 11-foot space and keep the 5-foot aisle open.
So that,
In the other case, I am allowed to overlap into that space, and indeed I have to in order for that
Right.
version to work.
well, as the language as the state puts it under marking, access aisles shall be marked with diagonal striping so as to discourage parking in them. It doesn't say that you can't park in them, but I think the idea is if you give someone an 11-foot space, they're probably more likely to be able to fit in that space
Oh,
and
yeah.
still
No,
accommodate
no,
themselves.
Yeah, what you need is 3 feet on the other side. You can park in 8 feet, but you can't exit with
Right.
a walker or a wheelchair on
So
the
I think-
right-hand side unless you've got an additional 3
I
feet.
think what it's trying to say is for those that don't know that they can park over the diagonal lines, that if you have a wider space, it's more intuitive that that is,
Okay.
that
So-
you can
so,
probably fit in there.
Yeah, one of these yields 27 feet, and one of them yields 24 feet. I think this becomes an interesting issue of how we expect parking lots to be laid out. And in any case, it creates some confusion. And in particular, the document, at least the excerpts we have, does not explain this at all. And I think it needs to be explained so that people understand, both the users and the enforcers, what the logic of this system is.
Well, I do think that allowing flexibility helps, in particular in infill development, when you're trying to squeeze, 10-pound
Right.
potatoes in a
The
5-pound
24
bag.
feet works, but
Right.
then what are we going to say when somebody comes in with a parking site plan?
Well,
We're
if we,
going to accept either one.
well,
correct?
if we were to change our zoning ordinance to refer
Yes.
to this code,
Yes.
so then, yeah, we haven't been able to have that flexibility before, and so that does present some
Right.
challenges, of course.
So maybe my suggestion is that we need to, if we're going to adopt this by reference, we need to add an interpretation in explicit writing as part of the record of how this is going to be implemented in the city of Urbana and what the logic of it is. Because from my experience, actually using these spaces, it's reasonably clear to me that a large portion of the population does not understand the logic of this.
And are you referring specifically to that you can park over the lines in the diagonal? Is that your
For
main
example,
concern?
yes, that's a specific example. But even, just the whole logic of, okay, you're sharing a space. That means if I'm actually in a wheelchair getting out of the driver's side, which there are now modern converted vehicles that do that, I get to park in an 8-foot slot 3 feet into that space. And if I have a passenger getting out on the right-hand side, I get to park 3 feet in that space. And then you have to close doors so that there's enough space for people to get through. But that works. That's okay. But again, I can imagine parking enforcers going around and not understanding the logic of that.
So are you suggesting some kind of just clarifying statement about the access aisle being
I-
available
Yeah,
to?
I think there has to be an explanation of how this works, because in what we're seeing, it doesn't even explicitly say that you can have an 8-foot space only if you have an 8-foot aisle. And you may have a 5-foot aisle only if you have 11-foot spaces. You have to look at the diagrams and say, oh, that's the logic, so that's what they must mean, but they don't say that.
I think, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, I think that's in the text that accompanies 502.2 vehicle spaces, where it says, and they don't put page numbers on their document apparently, vehicle parking spaces shall be either 8 feet wide minimum or 11 feet wide minimum, shall be marked to define the width, and shall have an adjacent access aisle complying with 502.3, which is 2 pages beyond.
Yeah, and this is where it says that 11 feet shall be no smaller than 5 feet, and 8 feet shall be no smaller than 8. But I think if you could put up the diagram of the 2 cars parked, I've had some experience with this, not much, but some, and,
Was
that's it.
this actually in our handout?
It was, but I don't know if it's the whole Illinois Register, I don't know if it's the whole regulation.
It's not,
Yeah.
no, it's,
I don't think we were
Yeah.
given this, or I didn't see it in
I just printed it off from online.
here, I apologize for that. Perhaps the printed copies were different than the online copies.
Yeah.
So which should we refer to?
I think
Yeah,
you've
so
got it
this
there.
is 5 foot, this
Yeah.
is what I didn't see.
Yeah. But I still don't think it resolves the question that you have, actually. And maybe we take that into discussion a little bit, but just for clarification, if you put the diagram up of the 2 cars, so that we can understand the point right now. So if someone parked on the right-hand side and the person who needed the extra space to get out of the car were on the passenger side, and there was another space right adjacent to that on the right-hand side, it would be very difficult for the person to get out without parking 3 feet into the striped area. I think that's the point, right?
With the 8-foot spaces.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, so this statement I did not see. I mean, that may have been there, but I didn't see it.
All right, well, any further questions? I think we can probably discuss it more a little bit if we want to ask for language.
Yeah, I think some clarification in the record or whatever could be useful, but the statement is there, and it actually gives
Helps.
11, it gives the minimums explicitly the way they need to be applied. It doesn't deal with the question of where you actually can park.
Right. Further questions for city staff? No? In that case, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody wish to speak to the Plan Commission on this plan case? All right, well then, we'll close the public input section and get to discussion and possibly motions and voting. So do you think, Mr. Hopkins, that you want some statement that to clarify that the,
I think to the extent that the minutes of the meeting are a record of the discussion, I think
They are.
the point is there. And my 2 major concerns, one was the number of spaces, which the table simply hadn't been included, and the other was that I didn't see this explicit description
Minimum.
of how the minimums
Yeah.
work.
Or
in a
tied,
combined
yeah.
fashion. So, I'm okay.
okay, good. Any further discussion? Any motions?
Somebody else can do this.
Mr. Ackerson?
I'll move it forward. I'm looking at, I move for approval of, that's right, I'm trying to make sure I get my wording right. Move for approval of plan case. Move to forward plan case number 2358-T-18 with a recommendation to approve as presented.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Ackerson. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Billman. Any further discussion? In that case, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Fitch,
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins,
Yes.
Ms. Vidrago,
Yes.
Mr. Weiskopf,
Yes.
Mr. Ackerson,
Yes.
and Ms. Billman.
The motion is approved. And do we have a date for this one?
Same date, December 17th.
December 17th. Great, thank you. Now I am going to open Plan Case 2359T18, application by the zoning administrator to amend the zoning ordinance with changes to Article 2 definitions, Article 5 use regulations, and Article 6 development regulations, and other relevant sections to facilitate solar energy system installation.
And instead of continuing that to the December 20th meeting, we thought we were going to have another case for that evening, but that does not appear to be the case. So how about we go to, can you help me out, Terry? Is it January 10th, 2019?
January 10th.
Sorry. Thank you.
Here, we got the calendar right here.
Yeah.
January 10th. Okay, so this case is continued to January 10th, 2019. New business, we have none. Audience participation? Last chance? No? Staff report? No staff report. No study session. Therefore, we are adjourned. Thank you.